Hey there internets, I'm Michael and today on Toucan Play That Game I'm going to teach you how to play Z-War One Damnation by Dice Sports. So how do you win in Z-War One? Well, that all depends on which mission you're playing, and there is a mission book here that gives you all the different missions. But your choice of missions is all dependent on the mode of play you're playing, because there are 3 different options. So you can play through this lovely comic book here, and then you'll get to a mission and it'll say, there you go, you've reached a mission. You do that mission as you're going through the story. And this way, none of the players need to be a GM. Everyone gets to play one of the heroes. However, this does limit the game to being 4 players, between 1 and 4. If you want to do a 5-player game and still be playing through the campaign here, you'll need to do the director's cut, which is where one player will be being the director and will be trying to kill the heroes. Whereas the heroes, their goal will always be dependent on the mission. The director's is always going to be the same, to kill those heroes. As soon as they kill any one hero in the director's mode, they have won the game. The final choice is to ignore this lovely, beautiful comic book completely, and instead pick one of the director game missions. And these are all little one-shot adventures, and still one player will be the director, but you will only have a single game. And this time, instead of the director winning by killing a single hero, he has to kill them all. So having decided what mode of play you're going to be doing, you now need to decide what roles each person is going to have. So if you've got a director, they'll be the director, and then you want to split the heroes as evenly as possible amongst the remaining players. Ideally, it's really nice to have one hero per player, but you can do whatever you want. You could be doing a solo game and have one person controlling all 4 heroes. Once you've done this, you'll need to get your deck of equipment cards and search through these to find the equipment that each of the heroes needs, which is given on their player boards. So you'll give them the equipment cards that they need. You do this for each of the different characters. Then you'll need to pick your mission. So if you are doing the comic book campaign, obviously you'll just start with the chapter 1 mission. But if you're doing a director's one-shot game, you get to pick whichever one you want to do. Once you've done this, you'll see for the director games there is an XP allowance for buying of perks. And I will talk about buying perks much later in the game, because that's really an after play thing for the campaign. I'm going to focus on that campaign play. Then you'll need to get your tracker sheet pad out, and you could give one person one to track everyone on, or you can give each person their own to track their own character throughout the different missions. You'll fill in the hero's name. Obviously, if you're playing a director game, you'll have XP. Otherwise, you'll just track this as you gain XP going through the campaign. Then the next section here, someone during the game will be crossing off the turns, so you're keeping track of the turns. The next section is for tracking any free turn timers that you need to do during the game, and it will tell you when you need to do this. Then, of course, the final section here is for tracking your ammo. So you just want to put a little letter in to say whose ammo it is you're tracking. So for instance, this is Sam's pistol, Victor's shotgun here, Cole's assault rifle, and then we've got Kat's 2 magnums, and at the very bottom we've got Sam's stink tank. Every time you use or use some of your ammo, you'll cross off here. A line represents how much ammo that weapon has. Once you are out of ammo for that weapon, you discard the card. So let's talk about these missions then. Well, at the top here, it tells you the name of the mission. So here we have Chapter 1, Supply Run. and then the amount of XP you get for completing the mission if you're playing in a campaign, be it the director's cut where you have a director interfering with the mission, or the normal campaign mode. Then we have a map of how to lay out the tiles. So we'll just match this up with the actual tiles laid out on the table, and it will also tell us where to put various things. So for instance, we've got this round circle here, it tells us to place a zombie there. We've got a med pack here, it tells us to place a med pack, and you can see the key here explains what everything is. So at the bottom here we have an entry exit point, and then we've got spawn points dotted around as well. And finally, we've got some objectives. Those objectives, we'll find out what they are in the bottom section here. So the mission section tells us any additional rules or what we're actually trying to achieve as the heroes in order to complete this mission. And this will be different for every single mission. The other two tables we have here are relating to spawning of zombies, and there are 2 times zombies spawn. There is a turn in which they spawn every round, and you'll roll first to see where they spawn and then how many, and then whenever the heroes open a room or activate a room, then you will roll to see how many zombies appear and then where they appear in that room. And these tables are different for every mission, so you do get a very different feel for each mission. As well as everything denoted on the key of the map, you'll also find any time there's a break in the white line for a building wall, you'll need to place one of these doors until your map is fully set out. So here we have the Mission 1 game all set up, ready to go. The final thing to do before you're ready to play is to take your search deck and just shuffle it up so it's all nicely randomised. The game is broken down into turns, and each turn consists of 6 phases as denoted on your player boards. So the first phase is turn announcement. Pretty obvious here, you announce what turn it is. So at the beginning of the game, the person who is tracking your turns will simply say it is turn 1. Next is your hero move phase, and I'll come back to that because that's a bit more complicated. Then we have your infected move, which obviously they're kind of understandable. Again, a bit more complicated than that initial phase. The 4th phase is your infected spawn. This is where you roll on your spawn table that will tell you which spawn point to come at and how many. Then is your infection test. This only applies if you have a bite token on your sheet, and I'll explain later how you get one of those. If you need to make an infection test, then you'll just roll on the infection check table. If you get the red result, then you move the bite token along the track. If you get stable, then you're fine. Then we move on to our final phase, which is the end phase. During this phase, any zombies that have been knocked down stand up, and any effects that would trigger in the end phase will happen. And additionally, whoever is tracking your rounds will need to cross off a round. So let's say we've just finished round 1. They then proceed to turn announce again. So this time they would announce turn 2. So now we need to go into a bit more detail on the hero move phase. But before we do, I just want to talk a bit about your player board here. So obviously you've got your picture, your name. Along the bottom here is your infection rate towards your damage being dead. As I've said, you've got a reminder of the different phases. And then in the bottom right, you have a space for any objects you've picked up. The top right here gives you your starting equipment. So you'll have your equipment cards and anything not equipped, and you only have 1 space for equipment. So we could put this assault rifle equipped, will be your equipment deck and would simply sit next to your player board. Some equipment, such as armour, will actually work while in your equipment deck. The reason I wanted to cover this is you can only attack with the item that is equipped, and you can see it's got double guns, and the reason for that is some cards such as these 44 caliber pistols have the dual wield symbol. That means you're able to equip two in the one space. So what can the heroes do during their hero move phase? Well, it is all listed out on the player board here along with the action points cost, and the number of action points you have is shown along the bottom. So if you're not wounded, you will have 4 action points. As you get wounded, you have fewer action points. So you'll activate each hero in turn, and they'll have to use their full 4 action points and before the next hero can activate. So the options we have: first, you may move 1 square for 1 action point. Alternatively, you can sprint for 2 action points, which allows you to move 3 squares, or if you're prone on the floor, you can still crawl 1 square for 2 action points. Dive also allows you to move, and this allows you to move 2 squares for 1 action point, but you will be prone at the end of it. To get up from being prone, you'll use stand up, which costs you 2 action points. So for some examples of how movement works here, we have here Victor and Cole hugging the side of this building, which the wall is shown with the white line, and they've got a zombie around the corner here. Now, the way movement works is you can move to any adjacent square, even diagonally. However, if you have like a building corner or a doorway corner, you cannot move diagonally across it. So for Cole here wanting to come out and attack this zombie, he'll have to go 1 to there, and now he can shoot the zombie. Let's say it's now Victor's turn and he wants to come out. He can't go through Cole because heroes can't move through other figures, be it other heroes or zombies. So he's going to have to go 1, 2, 3, and now he's out and able to attack the zombie. Additionally, when moving, of course, you can't go through a wall, that would just be silly, or through a door that's shut. And finally, if you try and move around a zombie, then it can grab you. And I'll talk about grab tests later on when I'm talking about the infected move. The next options you have are to open or close a door for 1 action point, or knock activation for 1 action point. These both will activate a room. Whenever you activate a room, you'll put one of these active tokens in it. So let's say these guys here are going to activate this room. There are 2 ways they could do it. They could either open the door and that activates the room, or they can knock on the door, which leaves the door shut but activates the room. So let's assume they've opened the door so that we can get the door out of the way. Then we've placed our active token. We then need to roll on the room spawn table for this mission. So for example, here is the table for the first mission. We have 2 rolls. First roll will dictate how many zombies, and this one does even allow for a nothing result. And then the second roll will give the distance. So say we had 1 zombie 4 squares away, we'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can put it on this line of squares that are 4 away wherever we choose. If it was 1, it would have to go on one of these, 2 on one of these. So we'll put it there. Let's say we've got 2 and it's the other end of the room. So once you have activated a room and there are no zombies in it, you could spend all 4 of your action points to search a room that you're in. You'll then flip the active token to the search side to show that it has been searched, because you can only search each room once. Then you'll draw the top card off your search deck and add it to your hand. And now we're on to the more exciting things, which is of course attacking. So you can quick fire or melee attack for 1 point, and you can actually move as part of a quick fire or as a melee for still only using 1 action point. To determine if an attack is successful, you'll roll a d8 and then compare the result to the table on your equipment card that you're using. So if you get the grey result, which would have been 1 to 4 here, then you miss. If you get the knockdown result, then you move the zombie so that it's laid down. If you get the kill result, then you remove the zombie from the board. Either way, you must remember to cross off the ammo used. It's important when attacking to take note of your equipment's type and range. So if it has a limited range of, say, 6 squares, you could only shoot up to 6 squares. Most ranged weapons will have infinite, and most melee will have 1 square. With regards to type, if it's semi-auto, this has additional rules when doing aimed fire, and I'll talk about those shortly. Also, so does full auto. When firing with full auto, you can fire 3 shots at once. What this means is that you roll 3 dice and you cross off 3 ammo. However, all 3 shots will be targeted at the same creature. So if all 3 come out as kills, you've still only killed 1 creature with those 3 shots. You can freely switch between semi or full auto with the assault rifle here. When performing a ranged attack, you'll need to work out whether or not your target is within range. You can count the range by counting the number of squares you'd have to move as if you were moving there. So you can't go 1, 2, 3, you could go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you also need to take into account line of sight. Now, line of sight works by tracing a straight line from the centre of your square to the centre of the square you're trying to hit. So you can shoot across corners like so, and of course I can shoot this guy quite easily, he's in plain sight. But if there was a zombie here, for example, they're out of line of sight, so I cannot shoot them. Melee attacks work much in the same way, except for, obviously, line of sight and range. You're only ever going to have 1 square. Also, you cannot attack diagonally across a corner or doorway, such as here, with a melee weapon. You would be able to shoot this zombie from here, but not use a melee weapon. But you can still attack diagonally with a melee weapon if it's not across a corner. So, for example, Kat could take out her katana and slice up this infected here with no trouble. When you decide to move and quick fire or move a melee, you have to say before you roll any dice for the attack that you are going to move. You can do the movement before or after the attack, but you do the movement regardless of whether the attack is successful. So, for example, let's say we've got Katana here. She could go, right, well, I want to kind of move further into this room, but if I move while this guy's still alive, I'm going to get grabbed potentially. But you know what, I'm going to take the risk. I'll attack and move. So you do the move and you roll your attack. An additional choice when attacking is to do an aimed fire. This works exactly the same as quick fire, except for you add 2 to your dice result. Also, I spoke earlier about the fact that semi-auto has additional rules, and this applies to when you are doing this aimed fire attack. With a semi-auto weapon, if you do an aimed fire, any following shots that turn, be it because you are on alert, which I'll talk about shortly, or you're doing additional quick fires, will gain that +2 aimed fire benefit. But you can only do this if you are firing a single weapon. If you're dual wielding, you cannot do it. The next option is execution for 2 action points. Now, you do have to have a weapon. You can't do unarmed executions, and you must be adjacent to a prone zombie to do this. If your weapon requires you to take ammo for doing an attack, then you must knock off the ammo, but you don't roll any dice. You immediately, automatically kill the zombie. The next option is to go on alert. When you go on alert, you'll take one of these little alert tokens and you'll need to sit it in front of your character in the direction they're facing. So for Cole here, we could put it there, there, or there. This then dictates what area they are alert to. So where zombies moving will allow them to attack. So let's say he's going to face towards the camera there. And this means that anywhere within his line of sight, from a line following along his character this way forward that's within his line of sight, any zombies that move within that, he can take a shot at. And the shot will work exactly the same as when you are attacking during the hero turn, except for this will be as the zombies move during the infected phase. Now, he doesn't have line of sight to these two here because Cat is blocking his line of sight there. However, he can see this guy along the wall here, even though it's directly along that wall and he's facing that way. He does not have line of sight round this corner or round this corner. But as soon as they move out of that corners, he then has line of sight and is able to shoot on them as soon as they step out. It is possible for a character with a melee weapon, say Cat with her katana, to also go on alert with a melee weapon. But because of the range of the melee weapon, it's only once they move within one space range that you'll get to do an attack. However, you will get to attack before they get a chance to grab you, and I'll talk about that shortly. So where these are both in alert, they can do as many attacks as needed. So this guy moves in, gets killed, this one moves in and also gets killed because she can attack as many times as she wants. And the same with Cole here. Every time a zombie moves, he is able to shoot. But every time he shoots, he'll have to cross off ammo. And then we have Sweep, and I'll talk more about this when I'm talking about the infected move phase of the turn. The final option for the heroes to do, again, takes all 4 of their action points, and that is to perform a task. So some missions you will need to perform a task in order to meet requirements for the mission, and this will take all 4 of your action points. So how do the infected characters move? Well, to best demonstrate this, let's take Cole out of the picture here. So the way this works is if they do not have a character, so here we've got Cat, within their line of sight or smell range, and smell and line of sight are blocked by walls and doors, then they will only do their movement. So for a normal zombie, that would be 2 spaces. So this guy here can't see Cat, so he'd just move 2 spaces. However, as soon as he comes within smell range, 1, 2, 3, 4, so he's 1 away, or visual range, which would be as soon as he moved there, he will go into charge mode. Or if you start their movement in visual range, they will go into charge mode. When in charge mode, they will move further, and also they will move past obstacles. So if there was no charging going on and we had a situation like this, the nearest hero was over here somewhere, so quite far away, then all these zombies would want to move 2 spaces. But if you had a situation where, say, this zombie had already moved and now this one was going to move, but the movement would move into the zombie, they simply don't move. They don't even try to move through the spaces. They will move through any active zones if it would be a quicker route. So let's say this room here was active and there was a zombie here. He'd spend 1 movement to open this door and then his second movement to move there. Now obviously, actually the opening of the doors makes it slower, but he would still try and go through that active room as the more direct route. When the zombies are charging though, they will move through other zombies as long as they have enough movement to get past them. So when do the zombies get to attack? Well, if a zombie ends a space of movement adjacent to a hero, then they'll attack. So let's say you move these in the order of whichever is closest, so they're all close, so it doesn't really matter. This one will move 1 space, they're then within range to grab, at which point you have to roll on the grab table for that infected type, which is given on their card. So to begin with, you're only going to have zombies, you'd roll. If you get a 1 to a 4, which we did here, the character is taken down, which means you lay them on their side, they are now prone, and you take the zombie off the map. Then place the zombie on the character's player board. Whenever a zombie successfully grabs and takes down a character, then you will roll on their bite test table. So here we got a 6, which is safe, which means nothing happens. If, however, you'd rolled a bitten result, you would take one of your bitten tokens and add it to the player board. Whenever they get a future bitten result, the token moves along, as it would during the infection stage. If you have a situation like this where a zombie can move adjacent to a prone hero, they'll, instead of doing a grab test, just immediately move onto that hero. So you'll place them on the hero card and roll a bite test. If a zombie begins a movement phase on a character card, just immediately roll a bite test. So once a hero is being grappled by a zombie, what can they do? How can they get these zombies off of them? Well, they have very limited action choices at this stage. Possibly one of the most useful actions is for 2 action points they can sweep a zombie off, meaning you take it off the player's character card and place it prone in any adjacent space. So the main thing is it's prone, so it won't then be able to attack you during the movement phase this turn. And if you get all of the zombies off, you'll then be able to stand back up. The only other actions available to you is you are able to change your weapon, which you can only do once a turn, even if you've not been grappled. You can also do a quick fire attack, but only at the zombies grappling you. Alternatively, you could do a melee attack with them. Any knockdown results aren't going to do anything in that case, though. You ignore those, treat them as a miss. We've done all of our infected moves, all our zombies have moved all the spaces they can, and then we move on to the next phase, which is our infected spawn phase. So we roll on the turn spawn table. The first roll will tell us what spawn point they come out from, and the second roll will then tell us how many. The exception to this is if you roll a Roma result. If you get a Roma result, you don't roll for a number, you'll only have 1 zombie come out. However, rather than appearing at one of these labelled spawn points, they will appear at the nearest possible hidden space in an active zone to a character. So in the case we have here, where we've got a character here, the nearest place that's out of their line of sight, they can see all the way down there, all the way down there, all the way up there, all the way down here, would be in this active room here. So we'd place them there with a spawn point. So let's say we had a spawn point here which needed to spawn a single zombie. You move the zombie on, doing its normal infected move as if it was the infected move phase. So you'd go 1 and then it can see a hero, so it'd be in charge mode, meaning it will move its charge movement, which would be 4 spaces, so 2, 3, 4. If there was no heroes visible, it would just go 1, 2 towards the closest hero. You'll continue taking turns, doing all 6 phases until you finish the mission. The mission will either finish because the heroes have achieved the mission objective set out in the mission plan, or because heroes have died. So that is everything you need to play a normal game of Z-War One Damnation. But I haven't really talked about director mode yet, so let's now talk about the differences for this. First, you'll need your director cards. Now, the director will get a number of these cards as dictated by the mission you're doing, or if you're doing the director's cut of the campaign mode, then they'll get 6. So you'll shuffle them up and then give them the required number of cards. Now, these cards can do all sorts of different interesting things. They can make ranged attacks not very good. You can have additional zombies spawning. You know, all sorts of different things like this. You can make them fail an infection roll. This is the sort of thing that the director will be able to do. However, they can only use one of these cards each turn. Also, if heroes have any of these loot cards that they've gained through searching, they are able to discard these at the start of the hero turn in order to make it so that the director is unable to play any cards for this turn. This is the main change that you're going to have in the director game. Now, you don't get to move the zombies normally. They'll still move in the same way as they normally would, but the director will sort out all of that movement rather than the players. But they don't get to choose, oh, actually, they're going to go after this player instead. They still move following those preset kind of predictable movements of the infected. Unless you have one of the cards that will allow you to control zombies directly, and there are some in this deck. The one thing that the director will be able to do is when there is a room spawn and you need to pick where a zombie is going to be placed, the director will do that, still obviously following the distant rules as given out in the table, but they get to pick where on that line the zombie appears. Also, normally when you're moving zombies, if there is a tie for which is the nearest hero, you'd roll dice to decide which one they go after. In the director mode, the director gets to decide that. The last thing to talk about relates to XP. So when you're playing through the campaign, you'll gain XP as given for the mission. Also, if you find any of these loot cards when searching, they'll give additional XP to the character who has them at the end of the game. During the campaign, this XP can then be used to buy perks, and there is a price list available for these perks. You'll also use this during the director one-shots, because those give you a certain amount of XP in order to buy these perks before the game starts. To determine the cost of the perks, you'll need to look at your player board, and there are these 4 circles and they will have different colours. These relate to the different traits of perks. We have agility, ballistic, melee and survival. So the colour of this will then dictate the cost of each individual perk. So if you've got orange, it will be the middle cost. If it's green, you get the lowest cost, and if it's red, you have the most expensive cost. And that is how you play Z-War One Damnation. I do hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. Of course, if you have, please do check out the rest of the videos on the channel, as well as subscribing to the channel and sharing it with your friends and family. And do also take a look at us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching, and bye for now.